Hey, hold your beer, wine, or anything at all, or nothing at all. It doesn't matter. Hi, I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome to The Story. This is our very first episode of 2021. Hello to you and this new year. And I know a lot of people are all about that new year, new me kind of stuff, but we haven't really changed at all, including the contact information you can see at the bottom of the screen. If your New Year's resolution is, I want to watch more local news shows and you've stumbled onto us, well, let me explain kind of how this works. We love using your questions and comments to fuel this show. So tweet us using the hashtag HeyDan, email the story at kgw.com, and we're going to be reading a few of those emails tonight on the show. Now, as it turns out, we're not the only ones who didn't really change much when the clock went from 11:59 to midnight on New Year's Eve. Oregon's COVID response is exactly as we remember it.
Vaccinations in Oregon, boy, they are slow going.
Since the first vaccine was approved last month, Oregon has received 190,500 doses. According to OHA, only 48,725 people have actually gotten their first shot.
Oregon is behind 40 other states in its pace.
Again, no excuses. We're not where we want to be.
Okay. Listen, I know we've given the state of Oregon a hard time in the past, and so hard we've actually gotten a decent amount of feedback that sounds pretty similar to this email we got from a viewer named Dan Brown. He said, lighten up on COVID vaccination speed. Better to do it right than rush into it and not be prepared for the outcome. Trust me, I want the vaccine, but the essential folks need it, and it needs to be done safely. And I appreciate the feedback, Dan. You have a great name, by the way. It proves you're smart. But in our defense here at The Story, we've only criticized the state when they really whiffed it. All right, tiny little things like our miserable unemployment benefits rollout, our testing fiasco, our failure to contact trace like barely at all, our delay in starting to vaccinate people, and now our delay in vaccinating people at all. Oh, and there's also that time on New Year's Day that Oregon's iPhone contact tracing app was turned on by accident, and then the Oregon Health Authority couldn't tell us how that happened or when it will actually be turned on for real. But, other than that, we've been absolutely nailing it, And Dan, look, I get the concern to want to make sure that the vaccine is safe before administering it. Of course we do. But the FDA, that pact of Western states that we're a part of, local hospitals, they've already determined that it's safe enough to give people right now. That's why people are getting it, just not enough of them here. Now, since the first vaccine was approved last month, Oregon has received roughly 190,500 doses. But according to the Oregon Health Authority, their own numbers, so far, only about 51,000 people have gotten their first shot. In Oregon's defense, all right, if you can call it that, this is a national problem, okay? We're not the only state dealing with this sort of thing. The latest data from the CDC shows only 4.2 million doses have been given out of the more than 13 million doses shipped to the states. Even though you probably remember the federal government promised 20 million people would be immunized by the end of the year. We're not even close to that number. But as far as Oregon is concerned, think of it this way. Oregon gave out just 12 shots on Christmas. 12. I know, it's a holiday. I get that. But 12? The virus does not care about our holidays or where they fall on a calendar. So here are the facts. Oregon is behind, and Oregon has been behind, and not in just one category. Most of them, really. If that isn't a good enough reason for us to hold our leaders accountable when lives are literally on the line, when businesses and livelihoods are on the line, when our children's education is at stake, well, then I don't know what is. And that leads us to our big story. A huge update today from Governor Brown, who, of course, is well aware of what's happening, the low vaccination numbers that we've seen so far in this state. And today, she set a goal to vaccinate more Oregonians every day. A lot more. At least that's the promise we're hearing right now. I want to bring in Pat Doris. He's been on the vaccine beat for us since there's essentially been a vaccine to talk about. Pat, tell me a little bit more about what the governor is saying today in this new plan.
Well, she's ordering the Oregon Health Authority to make sure that by January 22nd, 2 weeks from now, that 12,000 people a day are being vaccinated. I checked with her office. I said, okay, is that 5 days a week or 7? They said, no, 7. So 80-some thousand people a week being vaccinated. That's their goal 2 weeks from now.
It sounds great. Is it attainable? Do you think that's, are we capable of doing that?
We'll see. It'll have to be much more widespread than it is right now. Right now, it's concentrated kind of to the Portland area hospitals, and it's nowhere near that. But When I talked with Legacy, for example, today, they said, while it's been kind of a slow start for them, they do think they could quickly get up to where they're doing about 2,000 a day.
Yeah, that'd be a big improvement, that alone. So why is it, though, that we seem to be, or why we are so far behind other states in every one of these these categories, these check boxes to show how we're doing with this rollout?
That is an excellent question that I don't think I can answer, actually. As I was talking to the doctors today, they did say that it's just, technically a lot harder than you would expect. But as to why we are a little bit behind the rest of the country, I don't know. I did note that in the governor's statement late today, she said, on a per capita basis, we're about average with everybody else in the rest of the country. I'm not sure that everybody's going to buy that argument, even if it is technically correct.
So I've been hearing a lot of stories about healthcare workers who are declining the vaccine and saying that they don't want it. Can you explain a little bit? First of all, are you hearing the same thing? What would be the motivation there? And is that potentially one of the reasons we've seen kind of a slower rollout, maybe a little bit of a confusing rollout?
There's a lot in that question. Let me take the last part first. I don't think that's the reason for the slow rollout. I mean, I do believe them when they say it's harder than having people stand shoulder to shoulder like in a flu vaccine, everybody come get it. And they were worried about would there be reactions on the first shot, so they try and stagger it, so you don't wipe out the whole emergency department, for example. Legacy told me that about 10 to 15% of their medical folks are saying thanks, no thanks. And it might just be that they want to see how it reacts in all of their colleagues. I don't think that that's slowing down, though. I really do think that it is kind of how do we get people in? We got to schedule them. They got to stay 6 feet apart. We got to watch them for another 15 or 30 minutes afterwards, and then we got to get the next batch in. But, they say they're refining it, and they're going to get a lot faster, and it'll be interesting to see how they do that.
All right. Yeah, Pat Doris. I could keep talking to you forever and ever. I know our viewers could as well. So if you have questions for Pat, send them our way. Use that hashtag. Hey, Dan. Pat, thank you.
My pleasure.
And it's not like the vaccine can just sit in those hospital freezers forever. I mean, just like a carton of milk you have in your fridge, this stuff expires, which has some viewers wondering if our supply could possibly go bad. And if so, when? Let's bring in Kristen Severance for the answer.
Dan, we have 2 vaccines on the market right now, so 2 different answers for that. But before we get to that, we've gotten so many questions about the vaccine rollout, like this one from Al. He asked, if Oregon cannot use the vaccine it's allocated, won't some units spoil? That had us wondering about when the COVID vaccines expire, how long they can be kept in the freezer, and how long they last once thawed. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines both have a shelf life of up to 6 months when frozen. But Pfizer's vaccine must be kept at about minus 70 degrees Celsius, which requires a special kind of commercial freezer. The vaccine can only be stored for 5 days at regular refrigeration temperatures. Pfizer said the vaccine is being distributed in thermal shippers, which maintain ultra-cold temperatures using dry ice. The vaccine can last up to 30 days by refilling these shippers with dry ice every 5 days. Moderna said its vaccine can be stored for up to 6 months at standard freezer temperatures around minus 20 degrees Celsius or 30 days refrigerated at about 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. We told you last week Oregon has been vaccinating healthcare workers slower than expected. According to the Oregon Health Authority, more than 190,000 doses have been distributed, and just over 51,000 have been administered. That's about 26%. I asked Dr. Joe Sullivan with the Oregon Health Authority if he's concerned about any of these vaccines expiring.
The vaccine won't last forever. I mean, it can expire. Are you worried about that? Having it in storage for too long and maybe losing some of it because it is a difficult process to get it into arms?
That's a great question, but I'm not particularly worried. Both of the vaccines can be stored in freezers for 6 months. And so once it's thawed, that's really when the clock starts to tick. So for Pfizer, it's 5 days, and for the Moderna vaccine, it's 30 days. That's the other reason that sometimes this rollout's a little bit tricky. You have to know how much you're going to thaw, that you're going to be able to use it in a reasonable period of time. And so that's a learning process that we're going through now.
And again, because of the 6-month freezer shelf life, Dr. Sullivan said he is not concerned about the vaccines expiring in Oregon. Hope that answered your question. Do you have a question about the vaccine, about the rollout? Let us know. Just use the hashtag HeyDan.
And let's stick with some questions for the time being. Good question now coming in from a viewer named Terry Steiner, who tweeted us and said, "Hey Dan, I heard that the Oregon Health Authority has only identified vaccine candidates for phase 1A and 1B, but no specific groups identified beyond those two. Is that true?" So Terry, thank you for that. And yes, to our knowledge at this point, we only know about phase 1A and 1B at this point. That's it. So far, Oregon is only vaccinating people in that 1A category. So we haven't even gone to B yet. These in A are the high-risk people like the healthcare workers or nursing home residents and staff, places where a lot of high-risk people live in close quarters. As for people in that 1B group who will be next to get the vaccine, these will be other essential workers like educators and school staff, or other people whose jobs might put them at risk or at a higher risk to get this virus. It also includes people older than 75 and people with pre-existing health conditions. And I know that all sounds a little bit vague. You might be wondering, where do I fit into that? And it's also not clear when those people exactly are going to start getting the shot. We do know that the state has been relying pretty heavily on CDC guidance to make these decisions, and there hasn't been any guidance from the CDC yet. So let's wait and see what they have to say. Oregon is also putting together its own vaccine advisory panel to help with these decisions, which sounds like a sentence I probably should have been reading, I don't know, months ago. But last we heard, OHA had just finished recruiting members for this panel last week, and they're going to meet for the first time on Thursday. Now, here on The Story, we like to share works of journalism we think are worth your time. Typically, we share works of local journalism, but today, as you can tell from your screen, we're talking about the New York Times. But the subject is very local. The headline, a COVID-19 relief fund was only for black residents. Then came the lawsuits. Now, the gist of the story is Oregon had $1.4 billion in federal COVID relief money, and they earmarked $62 million to provide grants for black community members and business owners. The reason being the virus is affecting those communities disproportionately. Now, some people were on board with this idea, like Oregon State Senator Lou Frederick, who was quoted in the Times saying, "This is who needs this support right now." But that $62 million is on hold for the time being because two white business owners and a Mexican-American coffee shop owner here in Portland are suing the state of Oregon. They claim the earmarked funds are discriminating against them. One of the plaintiffs was quoted in the Times saying, "It's discriminatory. It's locking up a bunch of funds that can only be used by black businesses where there's a ton of other businesses out there that need access to those funds. It's not a white or black thing. It's an everybody thing." The entire story is fascinating, and it's on the front page of today's New York Times, right next to everything else that's happening today. And we think it is really worth your time. We are fresh off of one of the worst fire seasons in history, but Oregon's actually still recovering from many fires over the years. And tonight, some long-awaited good news from the Gorge. Also, have you ever heard of the 24-hour Church of Elvis? Yeah, neither did I, until a viewer asked if we had any video of it in the KGW Vault. We do, by the way, and we're going to show you some when the story continues. Hey, welcome back to The Story, our very first show of 2021. We're about 15 minutes in. It's going so far so good. I got high hopes. I did say that in 2020 also, so keep that in mind. Give us an idea of things you want us to cover, right? That's the whole purpose of the show. Use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. Email us at thestory@kgw.com. And, we've been getting some emails about this topic, and I know it's something that everybody loves, and that's the Gorge. It's one of Oregon's main attractions and one of the most beloved stretches of the Gorge just opened back up 4 years after the massive Eagle Creek fire shut it all down. And John Goodwin got a firsthand look for us.
That trail is one of the premier destinations in Oregon for good reason.
More than 3 years after the Eagle Creek fire roared through the gorge, the forest is coming back. And now, too, are the hikers. I got to check it out today with my dog, Zoe.
The Forest Service alone has spent thousands of hours, and our partners, specifically the Pacific Crest Trail Association, has spent literally over 6,000 person hours opening this trail in the summer heat, in the winter rains, literally just blood, sweat, and tears chipping away at this trail to bring it back from the dead.
There are still reminders here, and there will be for a long time. Trail Supervisor Nathaniel Brody says it's possible thousands of trees will fall over the next 10 to 20 years.
if there's significant wind, I would stay away from the forest, or be heads up, be alert, have your situational awareness up at all times.
No wind today, just a classic Northwest day.
Oh, what rain? This is nothing, come on.
A hiker I ran into said there's no such thing as bad weather, only inappropriate clothing. Aaron Metcalf is excited to see the trail being used again.
Hearing that the trail was open, I was so stoked. I had a day off and I really was like, it was kind of a no-brainer to come out here no matter what the weather.
The Forest Service says if you're going to come out, be careful and be prepared. The landscape has changed, and so will the way we care for it.
It is just a spectacular trail that offers a full breadth of Oregon and Columbia River Gorge ecosystems. So it's certainly a favorite. I can see why it's a favorite to other people. And I'm happy that we were able to open it so that all can enjoy it again.
On the Eagle Creek Trail, John Goodwin, KGW News.
Some parts of the gorge have been closed for years since the Eagle Creek fire tore through. But how did we get here? Let's go back to September 2nd, 2017. That's when a hiker on the Eagle Creek Trail came across a group of teenagers. She saw one of them throw a smoke bomb into the canyon below. A few minutes later, the forest filled with smoke and the fire exploded. 150 hikers were trapped on the trail overnight and rescued the next morning. The fire continued to spread, burning 13 miles in 16 hours. 400 homes were evacuated, and a huge stretch of I-84 was shut down. The fire grew for months, destroying a huge part of the gorge. It was finally contained at 50,000 acres. The teenager who started the fire pleaded guilty and was sentenced to nearly 2,000 hours of community service. He was also ordered to pay more than $36 million in restitution, although a judge acknowledged the teen wouldn't be able to pay anywhere close to that full amount. In the years since the fire, the Forest Service has slowly cleared trails of debris and deemed some safe enough to reopen. But other parts of the gorge are still closed indefinitely. And that's how we got here. Now, there are few weeks in politics as consequential as what we're about to witness this week. Tomorrow in Georgia and Wednesday in Washington, D.C. Now, tomorrow, Georgia holds a special Senate runoff election. Both of the state's incumbent Republicans, Senator Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, they're facing off against two Democratic challengers, Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff. And because of the GOP's slim two-seat lead in the Senate, if the Republicans lose both races tomorrow, there will be a 50-50 tie in the Senate, and a tiebreaker goes to the vice president, who in 16 days will be a Democrat, Kamala Harris. What I'm saying is, if both Georgia Senate seats go to Democrats tomorrow, Democrats will control the Senate for the first time in 11 years, and that could mean the difference between President-elect Biden spending at least 2 years passing bills or spending at least 2 years in the typical gridlock that we've been used to seeing in Washington. That's why the world is watching this election, including people right here, including one of our viewers named Arlene Reitz, who asked us, how soon after Georgia's runoff election will the winning senators be seated? So the simple answer to that is the winner will be sworn in when the votes are certified. But as we've seen, even something as simple as that can be very complicated when people in power choose to challenge the results, even if they don't have a case. But Georgia law states that the results, quote, shall be certified by the superintendent no later than 5 p.m. on the second Friday following the date on which such election was held, which would be January 15th. I also mentioned something happening Wednesday in Washington, D.C. That's when Vice President Pence will be called upon to tally the Electoral College votes and officially, once and for all, call the presidential election for Joe Biden. But a handful of Republican senators have said they will object in some kind of last-ditch effort to overturn the results and keep President Trump in the White House. It is mostly a symbolic gesture, we should probably say. But this morning on KGW News at Sunrise, Pacific University political scientist Dr. Jim Moore said these symbolic formalities can have some real consequences.
It is just a formality. Remember, last week there was a group of Arizona Republicans in the House who filed a suit saying that Mike Pence ought to interpret his role as the president of the Senate so that he actually decides whose electoral college votes count. Now, remember, as Mike Pence is the vice president, you're then the president of the Senate, so he plays a crucial role. But according to the law from the 1880s, his job is basically just to be the person who oversees the process, not actually intervenes. And that's when we look at Congress and its role, the law is pretty clear. Congress just receives the results. The states are the ones who cast the Electoral College votes. Congress has nothing to do except receive them officially by the United States government and say, these are the results. So all this stuff about what's going to happen on Wednesday, it's going to be fascinating, but more fascinating in what it tells us about kind of the future of the Republican Party.
I know we're all done with the Electoral College. I think we've all had our fill. But look, in order to actually overturn the results in the Electoral College, a member of both the House and Senate would need to sign on to a formal objection, and both chambers would need to vote to overturn. And since the House is controlled by the Democrats, the chances of that happening are approximately zero. Let's just say zero. Now, look, we love to dig into Portland's history on this show, and we use the KGW Vault to do that. And it's become pretty apparent to me that Portland's been, let's just say, weird for a long time. Case in point, this suggestion from Kirsten. Question. Curious, she says, if there is anything in the KGW Vault regarding the Church of Elvis that used to be in Portland. January 8th is his birthday. So I hadn't heard of this, or maybe you have. Some of you might remember it. The 24-hour Church of Elvis. It was a coin-operated art display first installed downtown in the mid-'80s. And according to the Oregon Historical Society, if you put a quarter in the machine, you could hear a sermon from Elvis. You could confess your sins or get a photo with the king. The church's creator also offered Elvis-themed weddings, both legal ones and for novelty purposes. KGW talked to her back when the church was still up and running.
I'm not that into Elvis myself. A lot of people have that mistaken impression that the Church of Elvis is about Elvis. So he's just a handy icon.
So the church moved around to a few different locations during its time before shutting down once and for all in 2013. But it became pretty popular in the 90s with the Los Angeles Times and the Wall Street Journal both profiling it. Even Jay Leno came up to pay it a visit. Now, we also know Elvis himself did visit Portland in 1957 to play a show. KGW was there, so we're digging around in the vault right now to see if we can find some tapes from that too. And if you got a suggestion for the vault, send it our way. Email the story at kgw.com. You could send me a message on Facebook or use hashtag. And use Twitter and the hashtag #HeyDan. All right, when we come back, we are going to respond to a viewer who just wants a little real news. All right, I want to end now with a complaint we got from a viewer that I want to share. They didn't leave a name, but they did write all of this in the subject line. Quote, real news instead of the garbage KGW deals in. That was in all caps, by the way, which means they're serious. The entire body of the email was a link to a story on the far right-wing website Breitbart with the headline, Antifa New Year's Eve protests leave tens of thousands of dollars in damage. Hey, say what you want about Breitbart. That's your own opinion, but I got to say, strong headline writers over there. Sounds a whole lot like this one, actually. Quote, riot in downtown Portland on New Year's Eve reportedly caused tens of thousands of dollars in damage. Who wrote that one? I'm wondering. Oh, it was us. We did. That was our headline on KGW.com. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt on that one. Maybe you dismissed it. I'm sure you didn't just fire off an angry, insulting email without even checking first. Who would do that? No way. Also, I want to thank James Lincoln for reminding us once again that we have another light out back here, which every time one goes out, James lets us know. We'll be right on that, James. That's it for today. First story of 2021. Great to be here. Thanks for being here with us. We'll keep the train on the tracks as best we can. We'll see you back here tomorrow.